Dinosaurs have been gone for a really long time, but people have made a lot of video games about them. Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on gameranx, 10 dinosaur games you need to check out in 2019. Just a quick disclaimer, we're not just gathering up games from this year, we're going to talk about a nice little selection of dinosaur games from through the years, but you should definitely give them a shot if you haven't. Coming in at number 10, it is Primal Rage. Is just an absolutely wonderful arcade game from 1994 that Atari unleashed on the world. Primal Rage is a 2D fighting game, and at first glance it doesn't seem massively different from other fighting games, but I mean, it's a game where you play big monsters fighting each other. It's so fun, it's so ridiculous, and the end fight, you just fight all of the monsters throughout time. It is a game that is so fun, that's so enjoyable, and I absolutely remember this game about as fondly as anybody can. Moving on to number 9 is The Isle. The Isle is in early access, so it's about the polar opposite of Primal Rage in more than one way. It is not a fighting game, it is a survival game. And in truth, it's one that I've watched with a fair amount of interest. It's an island inhabited by dinosaurs that you have to exist on. You do not play as a human being defending yourself from dinosaurs, you play as a dinosaur. It's my opinion that this is just an infinitely more interesting angle right now, at least. When we've played so many survival games, we kind of know exactly what we're getting with most survival games nowadays, but I think this is a slightly more unpredictable, more raw and natural look at that, and how often you get to play as a dinosaur. And if you don't want to play survival, there's a sandbox mode, where you get to be able to play as a massive dinosaur with no penalties if you die. It's awesome. It's something you would have described as a child as something you'd like to play. Or at least I definitely described this as a child as something I would like to play. Moving on to number 8, it's Primal Carnage Extinction, an asymmetrical online multiplayer shooter in which there is a human team and a dinosaur team. How can you not just immediately go, yeah, that's actually a good idea and I think I would play it? Because that's what I did the second I heard of it. And I'm going to go ahead and say Primal Carnage Extinction delivers on what it sounds like. A lot of the asymmetrical games aren't done well. Primal Carnage Extinction is. Yeah, it's dumb. Yeah, it's not the most complicated game you're ever going to play. It's simple. Frankly, that's exactly what it should be. A lot of games journalists and reviewers don't necessarily agree, but this is one of those games where I think if they had made it super involved and super complicated and make it like a simulation or some crap like that, it wouldn't have been as good. Sometimes games are just better when they're simple, and in my opinion, Primal Carnage Extinction is an example of exactly that. Moving on to number 7, it's Dino D-Day. Okay, so let's just go ahead and say this. Dino D-Day is an outright dumb idea, done in a manner that is outright fun. It's not going to wow you visually. Sure, it's got good art direction, but the graphics are very simplistic. It's absolutely the idea behind the game that makes this game worth it. It's a class-based, team-based multiplayer shooter. It's not even necessarily the gameplay. The gameplay is alright, but this is a game that is about an alternate history in which, during World War II, Hitler figured out how to resurrect dinosaurs. Now, anybody who's ever played this game knows that it could be better. However, just on the sheer nonsense that is the concept alone, it is worth a play. Reviewers were a little more harsh on it than I think they needed to be. It's one of those games that's just, like, you know exactly what it is from the premise, and if you understand it as light fare with a great, utterly nonsensical concept, Dino D-Day is actually pretty fun. Moving on to number 6 is Horizon Zero Dawn, which is a game that if you describe the concept to somebody in the future after the apocalypse, there were robot dinosaurs, you'd probably go, huh, that sounds kind of, I don't know, like a Dino D-Day level game. Not that Dino D-Day, it needs to be unfairly derided here. Horizon Zero Dawn is like, if you've played it, you know what I mean, it's amazing. Horizon Zero Dawn is such a wonderful single-player experience. It almost single-handedly justifies the PlayStation 4. It's a game that is worth owning a PlayStation 4 to play. The story is great. The controls are even better than the story, the world itself is beautiful, and everything about its concept is just executed wonderfully. By the end of it, you forget you're playing a robot dinosaur game. It's basically that immersive, involving, and enjoyable. And if you haven't played Horizon Zero Dawn, why not? And moving on to number 5, it's Jurassic World Evolution. Which, I mean, there's a lot of Jurassic Park games. We decided to go with the most recent for this video for a couple of reasons. First, it's obviously the most recent, the most fresh in our minds. But it's also a fairly weird outlier as far as Jurassic Park games go. There's a lot of different Jurassic Park games, and this one's a business simulator, which is on itself, like, great. It's not the best business simulator. There are times where it feels like it drags quite a bit, but it is a simulation for running a dinosaur-filled park, in which basically everything that could happen does. And just from that perspective, even though it's not the best business sim, let's say you don't play a lot of business sims, it stops being really that big of a deal. It's really just kind of a fun excuse to put yourself in the shoes of somebody running Jurassic Park. And that turns out to be an oddly relaxing experience for the most part. And it maybe actually should have leaned into just the whole, hey, here's Jurassic Park, you can look at whatever you want, do whatever you want element of it. Because it's kind of the simulation stuff that isn't really amazing. But that said, it's also not bad. And basically the game brings you enough charm and scenery and cool sights to justify the fact that it, over time, doesn't have a massive amount of depth in simulation. Sometimes progression just feels outright tedious in it too. Jurassic Park is actually a hell of a fun time for a lot of different reasons, but not necessarily due to its single-minded vision, cohesion, or depth. It's actually a lot of disparate things that are all interesting in some different way. Coming in at number 4 is Ark Survival Evolved, which, despite being the subject of quite a bit of controversy over a little bit of time, Ark is actually a pretty fun game. Basically, it's a survival game that you can tame creatures in, and is also basically ridiculous in a lot of ways. It's very pretty unless you're playing it on Nintendo Switch, and then it's very ugly. Don't bother with the Nintendo Switch version, it's a bad port. Also, keep in mind there's almost nothing I would say that about. I love the Nintendo Switch, so please keep that in mind. Now, there is a lot of crafting that goes on in this game, a lot of building, and a lot of grinding, so if you're not interested in those aspects, it's probably not the best game for you. However, the payoff for sort of setting yourself up in a good way is just phenomenal. Ark is so much fun when you've done everything right and set yourself up right. Moving on to number 3 is Turok Dinosaur Hunter, which is a game that I played a lot of on the Nintendo 64 way back in the day. Which, by the way, it was way too much for the Nintendo 64 to handle and played like crap. And as much as I like the Nintendo 64 controller, it wasn't what I would call ideal as a mouse and keyboard. Which is why it's absolutely wonderful that the source code to the game was sold for about $2,000 on eBay, and the game was remastered, ported to the PC, given the proper controls, and it's also been ported to other platforms as well, Xbox One, Nintendo Switch being the most notable. Turok Dinosaur Hunter is a charming game that was actually kind of weird, but it worked really well. It's a dinosaur FPS. The dinosaurs are the bad guy. FPS them. Coming in at number 2 is Monster Hunter World, which is not just a dinosaur game. It's technically a monster game, but there's dinosaur monsters in it. What, did you really want us not to mention this game? This is a big game, and there's things that seem like dinosaurs that are in it. So stop. It's Monster Hunter though. Like, have you ever played Monster Hunter? It's a delightful title. Monster Hunter World is of course the most recent. It also takes the most liberties with the formula without doing too much to it, and sort of updates and westernizes some of the ideas while keeping some of the more important core ideas very much the same. It's a mix that I think earned its critical praise, and a lot of people play this game because it's a hell of a lot of fun. It's an action RPG where you hunt monsters in third person. What's there not to like? The real appeal of Monster Hunter is, of course, the multiplayer, and Monster Hunter World delivers on that. If you haven't played Monster Hunter World, you need to. Like, it's great. And finally, there's Dino Crisis 1 and 2, which I'm gonna go ahead and say I prefer 1. I like the sort of more Resident Evil-oriented type gameplay of the original. I also prefer the original's graphics, which is real-time 3D, and although it was simplistic, when they moved to more of a action-adventure style game, with the second just totally going back to tank controls on a pre-rendered background. I don't know, I don't like Dino Crisis 2 as much as 1. 1 is just a triumph in my opinion, but a lot of people like Dino Crisis 2. I'm not gonna crap on you for having different tastes than me. These are actually two very beloved games, and obviously by the title, they have something to do with dinosaurs. They're made by the Resident Evil folks, and they're goofy as hell. They're also, like, not that similar as far as what they are, even though the second game continues the first game's story. They're like, let's continue the story, but change the game almost entirely. The game is out on PC, and if you've never played it, I would highly recommend it. A simple Google search will lead you to it, and frankly, I think you'll enjoy it. Which of these games have you played? Which of them are you gonna play? Leave us a comment, let us know what you think. If you like this video, click the like button. And if you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week, and the best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription. So click subscribe, and don't forget to click the notification bell. As always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter @FalconHero, and we'll see you next time right here on gameranx.